This video introduces Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. Some of you may not be excited about reading Frankenstein, perhaps because you read it in high school. Frankenstein might also seem too familiar and thus a boring, obvious choice for this course. After all, we all know the basics of the story, even though we might mistakenly think that Frankenstein is the monster when the name actually refers to the creature's creator, Victor Frankenstein. I would argue, though, that Frankenstein is a text worth getting excited about. For one thing, the timing's perfect. Halloween is coming up. Moreover, there is a lot more going on in Shelley's novel than pop culture indicates. It is a brilliant and sophisticated work that amply repays close reading and continues to be extremely relevant. Those of you in this class who are creative writers, who want to write a novel and care about craft, you have no better model here than Shelley's book. Here are some elements to consider as you read a novel like Frankenstein, whether you approach it from the point of view of craft or as a close reader. First, even though a novel typically is written in prose, it can still contain lyrical elements. Secondly, a novel, like other prose works, such as Equiano's narrative, has key paratextual elements. The paratext refers to aspects of a book beyond its main text. French literary theorist Gerard Genette stresses how the paratext serves as an in-between space that introduces and even controls the meaning of a text for readers. How do such paratextual elements of Frankenstein, as its title page, its dedication, and its preface, introduce the main text and contribute to or try to control its meaning? Also, always consider a novel's overall organization and form. Thus far, the form of Shelley's work involves letters from Robert Walton to his sister. The fact that Frankenstein begins with letters speaks to the formal roots of the novel, which are epistolary. Epistolary refers to letter writing. Walton's letters also refer to another formal element of Frankenstein, Shelley's use of frames. Walton recounts to his sister the narrative told to him orally by Victor Frankenstein. In other words, Victor's story is framed by Walton as a narrator and his own story. As you continue to read, you will encounter still more frames. How do those frames contribute to and enrich the meaning of the novel? Voice is another key element of a novel. Shelley uses the first person in Frankenstein. Famously, an interpretive issue raised any time one encounters the first person is the reliability of the narrator. In other words, can we trust Victor or Walton as persons who offer a just, accurate, and unbiased account of the events they describe? Another way of putting this is when, for example, Victor describes the creature. Do such descriptions actually tell us the truth about the creature? Or instead is Victor actually telling us much more about himself than what he describes, whether it is the creature or something or someone else? Yet another reason to get excited about Frankenstein is that we are finally reading a book by a woman with this new perspective. We are getting another valuable post-humanist take on humanism and the category of the human, and especially the celebration of human potential and brain power that had been going on for some time, thanks to events like the Enlightenment, the Scientific Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution. Recall, through notions like stadial theory, Enlightenment thinkers celebrated human achievement and linked it to progress, that is, to making things better for everyone on Earth. The last module examined how Equiano represents a paradox, how the achievements of the Enlightenment horrifyingly, have made things worse instead of better for humans. From the hell like slave ship in Chapter 2 to the iron machines of Chapter 3 and the lazy drunk sailors in Chapter 8. Equiano's narrative shows how human achievements based on reason and the scientific method paradoxically entail both limiting the agency of Western men and altogether irrational and unreasonable behaviors, like the treatment through slavery of humans as objects. As a Black man, Equiano was part of a group that, from the point of view of humanists and Enlightenment thinkers, does not have full access to humanity. Mary Shelley, as a woman, occupied a similar position in her dominant culture. Thus, Shelley was poised to offer a gendered critique of humanism. Shelley's posthumanism is very direct insofar as Frankenstein centers on a man telling another man about what some might consider the ultimate human achievement, making a human. Or to be more precise, another man. The creature is male. As Victor puts it to Walton in this passage from Chapter 3, I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of a being like myself, or one of simpler organization. But my imagination was too much exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. Victor here both celebrates man, which he calls complex and wonderful, and more precisely celebrates himself, Victor Frankenstein, as a man who has already achieved success in generating life and whose imagination feels exalted. Victor seems very proud of himself here, and Walton admires him very much. But keep in mind, this is a novel by a woman, a member of the very gender thought to be not fully human. Does Shelley actually think that Victor is all that? Crucial here is the fact that Shelley's mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, who wrote many works, but is most known for her vindication of the rights of women. Vindication means a defense or a justification. Wollstonecraft's book concerned defending women's rights and arguing for equality. At the time when Wollstonecraft wrote her book, in the late 18th century, and during Shelley's life as well, during the 19th century, attitudes toward women still really hadn't advanced past the binaries we first looked at in the Middle Ages. Women were still perceived as weak, incomplete, and indeed monstrous. Women were still perceived to be essentially linked to the body more than the head. Women were still perceived to be so emotional and carnal that they can never engage in higher spiritual thoughts the way that men can. Similarly, from this dominant and misogynistic perspective, women are unable to use their brains or reason the way that men can. Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, argued that women, and this is a bold move during that time, that women are actually human. As she puts it in A Vindication, it is time to effect a revolution in female manners, time to restore them their lost dignity and make them, as a part of the human species, labor by reforming themselves to reform the world. Wollstonecraft argued that women, like men, actually had brains, and that the only reason why women might seem inferior is due to the systemic effects of misogyny and patriarchy, which have oppressed women and limited their access to the education necessary to become full and independent adults or humans. Wollstonecraft's stress on education and reason reflects her endorsement of a key aspect of humanism. Do consider Wollstonecraft's feminism as you analyze Frankenstein. But tragically, while Shelley was keenly attuned to her mother's feminist belief that women are human and that they have rights and deserve a full education, Shelley did not have a chance to be raised by her amazing feminist mother because Mary Wollstonecraft died due to complications from giving birth to young Mary. This tragedy was not the only time in Mary's life when maternity was bound up with death. Of the children that Mary had with her husband Percy, only one survived. Such aspects of Mary's biography point to psychological issues that impact Frankenstein. As you read, ask yourself how Frankenstein is a novel about such problems as an absent parent, maternity, biological reproduction, and mortality.